Hey there, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. In my recent conversations with a number of distinguished guests who showed up on our podcast, uh, there's one question that I was asked repeatedly toward the end of the podcast. Question being, what do I think? Given the fact that I'm running a software product company, what do I think is happening in this space based on direct experience that I have with what we do at Snowpal and with our team, plus with what I've learned by virtue of by virtue of talk having spoken with a number of other guests. And I've usually given 2 to 3 minute answers, but I figured it warrants its own podcast. And so here we are. In this podcast, I'm going to just, hopefully it's 20 minutes or lesser. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to summarize a lot of my learnings in the last 4 to 8 weeks, give or take, in this space. I mean, it's a combination of learnings that come from my own direct experience at Snowpal and by talking to guests from all walks of life. They're all founders, co-founders, engineers at these incredible companies who are gracious enough to take the time and have this conversation with me on the Snowpal podcast. And a number of things, I've learned. Obviously, I learned a number of things in each and every one of those podcasts. So take this as a collective summary of everything I've learned in the last 8 weeks or so. I time box it so things are always changing. We are on a moving platform when it comes to AI, so it's my recent learnings, if you will. So what are we going to take a look at here? What's happening in this space? In the space, with AI and all that chatter that's happening around it. So if you're living under a rock, which I'm sure you're not, you can hopefully catch up with a number of things that are happening. Where are we at? In terms of software engineering using AI tools and technologies, right? And we also talk about verticals where I can about different industries because I've had conversations with guests who happen to be in the food industry, who happen to be in in certain other verticals. Like I've talked to I don't know if it was in the last 8 weeks or so. I had talked to a psychiatrist, so I had some learnings about what's happening in the space of medicine as well. So we'll probably do some vertical if I remember some of it. I'm happy to share it here. Third is, where do we expect to be in the next 6 months to a year? People have asked me where I think things might be 2 years from now or much longer. I could not have answered that question even 10 years ago when things were not changing just as fast, even though they were still changing. But now, with the pace at which things are changing, I don't know if anybody's in a position to answer beyond like 6 months, if that at all. Last but not least, how do we prepare for what's coming? Things are already happening, things are moving already. So, how do we actually prepare for what's happening, right? So, in a nutshell, those are some of the things we're going to look at. So, without further ado, let's get started here. First, AI is rewriting software teams and careers. Excuse me if I end up reading some of what I've written down here. It's going to help me jog my memory. Like I mentioned, in the introduction, the next 6 to 12 months, if you look further than that, like 2 years, things are, whatever happens is going to be, it's going to have a seismic impact and implication, set of implications, right? Because there's a lot of money being invested in this space. We'll talk about that as we go through these slides, the hyperscalers and how much money they are spending and whatnot. So whatever happens in the next 6 to 12 months or 24 months, it's going to have a lasting impact, is what I can tell, right? The way teams come into place, the money spent on infrastructure, the hiring processes, the overall business models, employment, and you name it. It's not just in software engineering, right? Not just for companies that are building software, for all types of work. I mean, it's white collared work primarily. Maybe the next 6 to 12 months or so, where the impact's going to be felt quite a bit. But I don't know if it's just limited to white collared work. Robots, in warehouses. You're also talking about impact that's in the coming. When you're talking blue collared work as well, right? So things are going to be very different. Is literally the summary of this first slide here. What's the big shift? There's many. One of them is the turnaround times for feature work in software companies. Like one of the founders told me that what used to take like 2 days or so, which in itself is not a whole lot of time, right? Because your average sprint is like typically is 2 weeks long, sometimes even 3 weeks in some companies. And that's short enough, even though we're all used to it. Uh, but but now we've come to a point where you're able to churn out incredibly meaningful features in a matter of days, not even weeks, right? So what was done in a couple of days, weeks, you could have done in a couple of days. But now, one of the founders told me that they were able to get stuff done in an hour or two. Sure, it's not the final version or anywhere near the final version, but at least a version of what they've wanted, they can start to see it appear in a matter of minutes or hours, right? That's incredible. 70% or more on an average of the code these days is AI generated. Whatever model, whether you're using Codex or Claude or whatever IDE you're using that has AI support, lot of the code, more than two-thirds of the code is being generated, right? So now you're going to be working in software systems. Earlier, when I started, right, which is feels like 100 years ago, the code was still being generated, but most of the code was not, right? Humans wrote a lot of the code, and they were assisted by a small percentage of generated code. But now the tide has turned. It's mostly generated code with humans playing a role where code gets a bit more complex, or you want to kind of help move things along. You chime in as a developer or as an architect, but a lot of the code is being generated. Teams are smaller, definitely. I cannot remember. I can think of one guest who's come on the podcast to tell me that they have actually not had. They don't have smaller teams now. I mean, some of them have said that they maintain the size of the teams so they can get more stuff done. But if you're doing the same number of things, which hopefully you're not, because you're able to do more at this point of time. But let's say if you're building a product, you have a lot of ideas, and there's this traction, you're going to keep building and improving upon it. But let's say you're in the service industry or you're in managed services where the client is saying, "Hey, I want to get six things done," then those they are only six things at that point of time, and they can be done very quickly with fewer people in the team. Roles, they are changing, right? I mean, there's no clear separation, not as much anymore, between developers, architects, product managers, testers, DevOps engineers, and product managers, and I'm sorry, project managers, and so on. While each role is still fairly well defined, the roles are changing. You don't have all the roles that you've had in the past. You have some new roles that are very specific to AI and data engineers and whatnot. And the existing roles are changing the way they have generally been in the past. I mean, you may or may not have an exclusive tester anymore, not in most teams at least. Maybe you have a part-time tester who's also well familiar with coding. Even if they are not doing the coding themselves, they are quite familiar with doing vibe coding and whatnot to getting the tests being written. A lot of the tests can already be generated. So again, maybe you have a developer who's playing the role of a tester as opposed to having an exclusive tester. Same thing with product managers. They're doing product management work, but also not giving English documents to developers, but actually giving them functional working prototypes to some extent, at least, like they're 60-70% of the way done before they hand off the requirements to the dev team. So that's a pretty big shift there. Let's keep going here. Smaller teams, bigger output. I think we touched upon it. Maybe some of them are redundant. I will just keep chugging along here. Teams are smaller. We talked about that. Or same team size with more output. We did mention that there is the theory that you don't have to go lay off people. Can maintain the same size teams, but you can do more, get more stuff done. I mean, while that is actually true, there's no denying that. We're not seeing that happen, not necessarily or not all the time, right? If AWS is laying off tens of thousands of people, it's not because of lack of things to do, right? That's the biggest income generator, not revenue, but income generator for Amazon. And they can surely do a number of things, and they are the cloud leaders, right, with 38% or so market share. But if they're letting more people, more white collar workers and engineers go, it's because they are able to get that done with fewer engineers. As you use AI and build more AI agents, maybe they are able to do more of what the humans did, and they create their own AI agents, and it becomes a, I don't want to say vicious cycle, but that's kind of, excuse me, where it's going. So you don't need as many people, probably, right? From what I'm seeing. So headcounts are reducing, and I expect more of this to happen in the near future, right? There are the jobs. it seems like we're looking into the future, looking at a future where there's going to be a lot more people and fewer jobs, at least the jobs we know of today. Hopefully more newer jobs we've not thought of up until this point, are definitely going to come into being, and I'll probably touch upon some of that as we go here. um, the new team composition, fewer junior developers. I think I've mentioned this more than once in some of the podcasts with Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg saying this, that Meta is not hiring as many junior developers anymore. Perhaps they're waiting for other teams to hire them. They become mid-level or senior before Meta hires them. Uh, so a lot of the founders, most people are telling me that they don't need as many developers in the team. You don't need junior engineers as much, probably not, maybe not even any. That's what it looks like. Not all companies need the junior devs. You can have senior people or mid-level engineers, who where this where the senior devs work as facilitators, right? You have a lot of the team members who have varied roles but are able to contribute to the code base by using vibe coding and generating code and whatnot. So you don't need as many people, and some of the roles, not as many of those anymore. AI certainly augments your development process and your execution process, and the team composition, we've talked about that already. Non-devs building software, I mean, that's happening, right? It's not something that's going to happen in future. It's happening as we speak. uh, Developers are not so much getting English requirements, like I said earlier. They're getting work that's sort of functional, right? And maybe the product managers in the business can vibe code their requirements and take it to a point for newer features or product ideas, so they can go raise money or socialize that with their end users or customers, and then get some feedback and then give developers a functional piece of code, and the feedback that they got using demos that they did by the code that they had actually written, right? Not that what the developers had written. Hopefully you're following the trail here. Proof of concepts are built without the dev teams being involved. In many cases, I've seen people have told me that they've gone all the way to production without a full-time developer in the team, or an architect for that matter. Software creation has become democratized, where more people can actually do this. You don't have to have gone to college or studied formal computer science to actually build software. Now, the more you know, the merrier. So it doesn't hurt to have the fundamentals in place. But can you actually build POCs and even production ready software by generating a majority of code that's needed? I think the answer is yes at this point. The hiring process has also changed. Yeah, I don't think teams are looking for, hey, I need a Python specialist, or a Ruby specialist, or a Golang developer, or somebody who's used to these kinds of tools and technologies. I speak mainly from a developer standpoint, but you can extend this to other roles as well. Um, they're looking for problem solvers, right? Can on go getters. In other words, it sounds cliched, but can you take the problem and figure out however you want to solve this problem? Can you give me a functional outcome that I can see and provide feedback on? Right? Use all the tools that are available. Do the least you've got to do as a human, but get stuff done as quickly as you can, as cheaply as you can. The language awareness certainly does help. If you've been coding a while, like me or a lot of other people out there, it does help. Coding awareness helps, and specifically if you coded in certain languages that the team is using, then sure, the ramp up time is going to be lesser, and you're going to think more fluently in the context of the team that you're in. That being said, it's become a nice to have than a must have these days. Cross domain adaptability is critical. You cannot, I mean, you want to be a jack of many trades at this point. You can be a developer, but you can be cocooned into a shell and just say, I'll only do this, not have any other interactions, or not know about anything else that's happening in the team or the company. Because you might be asked to go demo something to a client or be a product manager for a couple of days, and vice versa, right? The project manager, if you even need one full time, probably not anymore. Even the part-time project managers can become coders, right? Where they're generating code, even if they're not writing it, and they can give it to you. So everyone's going to have to be cross-functional. AI fluency is certainly mandatory. That's not optional. Whether you're a developer, an architect, no matter what the role that is that you play, a sales engineer, you're doing content creation, doesn't matter, right? You need to be fluent with everything that's happening in the space, so you can be adaptive. Things are changing very, very quickly, so you need to be able to adapt to all of these changes, and you're certainly not going to be anywhere near as efficient as if you actually are fluent with a lot of these AI tools. Um, 70%, like I said earlier, the code is generated. Developers are mainly refining, reviewing, and architecting, doing everything else that's peripheral and contributing to the code base, surely, but they're not writing the first, they're not certainly not writing the first line or the 20th line of code, right? A lot of it is already pre-written, either by somebody else in the team who's not a developer, or by tools that you're using as a developer that end up generating that. So being, you need to be a good problem solver, right? How you need to know how to approach an engineering problem, whether it's a feature or a bug, a front end problem or back end problem, a middleware issue, does not matter. But just the coding, raw coding skills alone certainly don't have anywhere near the value that they've used to have in the past. The speed of iteration, like I said earlier, has absolutely exploded. You're able to genuinely get seriously with serious features implemented in a matter of hours and not days. That's important to note. Turnaround time compression, I think we've kind of spoken to it. The delivery cycles have dropped from days to hours. You can have POCs built in a day, maybe in one session. At Snowpal, we have every day. A day is comprises of two sessions, 4 hours apiece, and we do a lot of what we do is defined by the session. While we trade and build our fintech API, the session is half hour. But when we do work towards the Snowpal's engineering and software related work, it's 4 hour session, 4 hour session. Same day POCs and faster loops. You get feedback much sooner. You don't have to have people to be. You don't have to expect people to imagine, because you can show them how things actually are working and not have them imagine how it might work. So there's less room for confusion, and you can reduce those gaps, and you're going to have fewer communication issues and whatnot. The software development lifecycle has certainly changed. I mean, I mean, there are teams that still using the traditional lifecycle, but I think the ones that are moving quickly are actually have changed quite a bit. Probably I'll do a separate video on this to see how showcase how we are approaching this aspect, this facet of software engineering, the SDLC. But for now, it should suffice to say that the whole architecture of a software application, doesn't matter what you're building, it is very, very different, right? It's not just how the teams function and how they talk to each other. AI has made an impact across the board, but also when it comes to software architecture, it better be different, because if it is not, then you're doing something surely wrong. The tech stack is also going to be quite different. You're not picking between NoSQL and SQL. You have vector databases that are very much probably the ones you want to rely upon mostly when you're building AI and AI native applications. I mean, and sure, you cannot use a combination of these. It's not you use everything that's AI related and don't use anything else that you've used in the past. But you're going to see more of this change happen. The tech stack is going to have to be a reflection of what's happening, which is always the case, right? A lot of the companies do it that way, like us at Snowpal as well. But what I'm specifically trying to impress upon here is your tech stack, even as current as it might be, it has to be current in the context of all the things that are happening in the space of AI and not just outside of that. That's important, because that space is very fluid. There are a lot of companies, and not all of them are going to exist 3 years from today. So you got to be careful which ones you engage with, because it's if you have a vendor lock-in, you could be in trouble if that company ceases to exist, because there's a proliferation of companies that claim to be at least AI ready, or they change the domain from .com to .ai, and suddenly they're just using OpenAI APIs, and you become an AI company. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it's important to note some of those things. Sorry, I digress there. Whatever your old, if you have a run book of list of things to do, and all of those things have to adjust themselves. It's not just you go through the path going from business to product teams to architects to developers to testers to DevOps engineers to advertising and marketing. Some part of the SDLC that I'm calling out for here. It's going to be very, very different. You're going to now have code given to you by a product team, which was not the case earlier. So your SDLC is going to have to be a reflection of these things that are changing. AI understanding, like I said earlier, is going to be non-negotiable. It's not just the talking the talk, right, of what you think is happening, but more very much so walking the walk here. The fluency in those tools matters, right? How often you use them, and how long you use them on any given day. collectively, right? You need to be a jack of all trades even when it comes to the AI tools, but you got to be a master of some as well to the extent possible. So that helps your fluency, right? Being a jack of many trades is important outside of this conversation, but at the same time, being a master of none is not going to help your fluency when it comes to the rest of the trades that you happen to be a jack of. So, a jack of those trades. Tool. I think we've covered that here. We've said that. I'm going to go to the next one. Um, Seismic change. I think we've talked about this as well. Roles will disappear, new roles will emerge, and disruption is widely expected. I haven't talked to anybody here who's skeptical of the disruption or the magnitude of the disruption that's in the coming. The only thing people have differing opinions of is how soon is it coming and what the impact is going to be. Impact is going to be in the near term, mid-term versus the long term, but nobody seems to be in denial, at least the people I've spoken to, that is in the coming. um, Infrastructure. So we've generally had these three big hyperscalers, right? The cloud providers, Amazon, AWS, which used to have a 50% market share. It's lost some to Google Cloud and Azure. So now I think they have about 38%. And then I believe the next in line in there, if I'm not wrong, is Azure. And then finally, probably Google Cloud, which is also not too far behind. So it used to be, hey, you go with one or the other. And these were the three big players. There were others, but these were the primary ones. But now you have a lot of these, what is called the neo cloud providers, which are very AI centric, right? So as as you think about deployments and infrastructure that you're using, the default does not appear to be these three hyperscalers anymore, because a lot of the other smaller companies, the neo cloud companies, if you will, give you some other tools, and the onboarding process could be better in some cases, and how you provision what you need is also going to be probably quicker as well. So if you had AI workloads in mind, these three hyperscalers are sure they're going to be around for a long time, right? They're massive companies, but they're certainly not the only options anymore. And then if you're looking at cost, maybe in certain cases you'll find that you have better pricing with some of the other providers, and there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of those companies, and maybe I'll do a separate podcast on those neo clouds at some point. Vendor lock-in is still real, meaning people who are using AWS are unlike they're not using the other hyperscalers, and even if they are, like we use AWS a lot, and we use very little of, say, Google Cloud and Azure. Agreed, we're a small company, but it's no different for much larger organizations. So there is that lock-in. So if you have your customer, there's a good chance you can keep them as long as you don't disappoint them, and you provide what they want. So if you are one of those cloud providers or neo cloud providers or whatnot, you can assume that your customers are going to make the switch only if something's only if you screw up or something doesn't go well, because people don't have the time or the interest to keep changing vendors. So that doesn't seem to be necessarily changing, and I haven't seen too much of an overlap. If someone tells me they're using Google Cloud, they're using a lot of Google Cloud services. Somebody says they're using AWS, they're using a ton of AWS services. They just have different engagement models with these providers, get some discounts and credits, and based on what they're doing and how interesting it is that they how interesting the stuff is that they're doing, these cloud providers are willing to give them better discounts and free credits and whatnot. um, okay. CapEx. I mean, we know that all these Meta and Amazon and Microsoft and Tesla, and anytime they report earnings, and Alphabet, they call out for hundreds of billions of dollars in spend on CapEx, and all of that money pretty much is going towards AI and GPUs, and ASIC chips, in other cases that are that's sold by Marvel and Broadcom. So that spend is not stopping. It's only gone up in the last 4 to 8 quarters, that these large companies, that they are spending a ton of money there, which means on the other side, they're taking money off of their operational expenses and putting them on these capital expenses, which means they have to slow down on hiring or let go of people, and lay them off so they can get that money and invest in these chips. That seems to be happening. Fewer hires and more automation is what we seem to be experiencing. Well, you probably heard of the new word SaaSocalypse. Is SaaS dead? Is it dying? No, it's not. It's evolving, right? Things are changing. Enterprise software is not going away, but you can see companies like Workday, CRM, like Salesforce, Intuit. There's a number of others. They skip my mind right now, like Team and Monday, Asana. They've all taken a beating. I mean, I think I did a separate podcast on that where they've lost like two-thirds of their market cap in the last 6 to 12 months. So there certainly has been an impact. But the enterprise companies aren't necessarily going away, right? It's just how you engage with them, and the type of value they provide is going to constantly change. You're going to have to, like, say, we sell APIs at Snowpal. The way customers would engage or integrate our APIs would change. Let's say we are working on building a model context protocol tier on top, a MCP server. So as opposed to consuming humans consuming the Snowpal endpoints, we expect AI agents to consume, our services, our backend services and APIs, but just the integration is going to be slightly different. So it would still be SaaS, but just in a slightly different capacity. Now, sure, our APIs can be licensed as well, so you can run in your own infrastructure. But I'm talking about it mostly from a SaaS standpoint. The seat-based pricing is certainly under pressure for companies that are doing that, because if you're companies like Atlassian or Monday or even Salesforce, if you're charging by the number of seats, you're taking a hit because it's not just humans. There are fewer people working in organizations, and as more and more layoffs happen, there's going to be fewer and fewer people, which means your per seat dollar amounts are not going to multiply as much because the total number of seats is going to diminish. And also usage based pricing is going to, our APIs are usage based. That will continue to survive, work all right, but that's going to change as well. Seat based is going to come under a lot more pressure. Usage based not so much. But that being said, even with usage based, the way you're going to approach that is going to change, because if you had to call 10 Snowpal endpoints to get something done, you paid for 10 requests. It's dirt cheap, and you'll save a ton of money doing that. But even with that said, you probably don't have to make 10 requests. You can make one or two and get everything that you're looking for, which means if we had made 10 times the money on those API calls, we would make technically one fifth of it. But at the same time, we're going to provide more services and value add. So we change our business models to accommodate what's happening in this space. So we continue to be adaptive, right? You can't say you've done it once and you're going to stick to it. That's not how successful companies work. You're going to constantly adapt and make changes. And we would make changes to our usage based pricing models based on the client's needs and expectations. And every company has to do that. Outcome based pricing is emerging. So it's not just, hey, how many calls, even in our case, how many endpoint calls times so much and I'll pay you the money. What can I achieve by making these calls? And then our pricing model has to facilitate that. Of course, AWS, has support for private offers. So at Snowpal, you can hit us up and work with us in we can create a private offer for you that is more driven by outcome based pricing and not usage based pricing. So those are the types of changes software companies, B2B software companies, are going to have to make. Entrepreneurship is going to be on the rise given all the layoffs, given the jobs disappearing in rapid pace. New roles will come into existence, but in the meantime, there is going to be a lot of restructuring, and folks are unfortunately going to be let off, I think. So more people are going to have to make the difficult choice. The thing that they really wanted to do all these years, the dream that they had shelved because they were on this boat sailing and getting paid, and were basically forgetting their dreams because of the salaries that they were given. Now they're going to have an opportunity to start their own businesses. It's not going to be easy. Somebody who runs a company, I can tell you, it's the hardest way to make money, but it's better than most other ways. At least for some of us, we enjoy doing this. We are very passionate about it. So entrepreneurship is going to be on the rise. Solopreneurs, you're going to see a lot more of them. You don't need 10 people to build software anymore. If you don't have the money, you don't have to raise the money. You can just use vibe coding to make a ton of progress and then raise money, or maybe not even have to. Like us, we never had to raise money. We have plenty of products in production already, right? There are cases we might need to in some situations, but not all the time, right? For a fintech API that we're going to build, it's very expensive to build it in terms of licensing and whatnot when it comes to stock exchanges and on Wall Street. So we're looking to raise some money just for that particular product and the API per se. But otherwise, we've not had the need to, and maybe more solopreneurs won't have the need to raise money or have a big team. They can just be a single person developer team and get stuff done. The odds of solo unicorns is also increasing. I mean, I don't know if there's ever one. Maybe there was, but there's going to be a lot more of them in future. I tell you. Global AI landscape. Well, the US and China, I have to say, are leading this. I mean, I hope US is ahead of China, but they're not too far behind. We know that. There are other countries that have to play catch up. India is a very important player in this space. While I don't believe India is making. Maybe they are making some GPUs right now, but not anything significant as far as I know. Nvidia and AMD and a lot of these companies have all of the market share. Broadcom and Marvel, they're all American companies. So the focus for Indian engineers, if you ask me, in my opinion, might be to help build these AI services. So if you're somebody who's in India, you're getting graduating from college or from high school, maybe you don't even have to go to college, or maybe you should. It just depends. You want to focus on learning, of course, everything that relates to AI, but at the same time, making sure that but your understanding is not, what you're learning is not theory, and it's very pragmatic. And if somebody needs your help, you're able to help them using the latest and greatest AI tools and technologies, right? That's where the Indian IT outsourcing world might have to switch gears, because every time Claude releases any models, 2 weeks ago they did, and I think the Indian IT companies took a big hit, like 10, the market plunged like 10 or 12%. If I remember correctly, it's because there's a lot of people, and if you have to have all of them employed, then you're going to have each one of them do a lot more and collectively produce a ton of products, either for their own companies or for vendors that they work with. So the outsourcing model is certainly transforming. So experience is being being reweighted. What I mean by that is, you know I never thought the longer you've done something, the better you are at it. I don't think so. I say this as someone who's done many things for long periods of time, and I then work with people who've done it for shorter periods of time, and they're certainly better than me. It just depends on where your focus is, right? You can be good at some things, all right, and others. The length of time does not matter, because you might be in a place where, hopefully you're not, but there are people who work in places where they repeat the same experience like for 10 years. That doesn't make it a 10-year experience, especially with things changing so much and so quickly. If you have 10 years, I think it's more than enough. Maybe 5 years is also good enough, right? Plenty. The recent How recently you've been working on these different variety of things, and what your experience levels are related to those services and products that help with make your company and your client productive, is essentially all that's going to matter. And you're going to have to continuously upskill. I mean, that's a given. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. um, a diploma, right? By degree, I mean a college diploma. A lot of the people have told me that's not mandatory. Some have told me that it's nice if somebody has it, so they can tell that they had a commitment. They were committed to doing something for 4 years or 5 years, and they proved that commitment. And they've learned other things in college, not necessarily academically, but otherwise in many other ways as well, right? So the diploma, it signals commitment and rigor more than anything else. So I mean, I get the feeling that as much as a college degree is not needed to build software, I don't think the mindsets of people have changed just as much. Not yet, at least. So maybe if you're going to college now, maybe you could still do it, as long as you're not left behind and you don't know what else is going on in the world in the 4 years that you end up living under a rock when it comes to college. But I think as in future, I think, if I have to make a prediction, I think education is going to change dramatically. Everything is changing. Education is going to be no different. Maybe in 10 years from today, who knows, maybe college degrees are not going to look anything like how they look today. Or maybe the way you engage in colleges after high school for 4 years or 5 years or 3 years, maybe that's not going to be the way things work. Maybe the education system is, I mean, it's been due for a change for a long, long time, and maybe this is a good time. This is a good opportunity for those changes to actually start to happen. And a shameless plug, when we're talking about education, we publish courses on the Snowpal product on our web app, mobile app. It's available on the web, on our mobile platform apps as well. We publish our own courses, but if you're a course creator, you're welcome to work with us. You get to keep 80% of the revenue that your courses generate, and we keep 20% for our expenses and our margin. Anything that can be helpful to the next generation of people, or to folks who are changing careers, because a lot of the jobs are going to disappear and never going to come back, which means those folks in white collar jobs will have to change to other white collar jobs, and anything that you can do to help them make the transition is going to be super useful. So if you want to publish affordable pragmatic courses, our platform is something that you do want to consider. um, what actually matters now? I think we talked about it a little bit. Cross domain thinking, the speed of execution, AI fluency, adaptability, how quickly you can switch from one to the other. Context switching is important. You cannot be single threaded anymore. And the ability to ship products in quick time becomes like super important. Okay, the real question: are you adapting or protecting the old model? I still have spoken to a few people who have still not made that switch. Maybe they're going to make that switch, but they haven't necessarily done it. Maybe because it's muscle memory. They've done things a certain way in the past, and they think if it worked then, it should continue to work. If it does, good. But if you ask me, I wouldn't bet on it working. So you're going to have to be adaptive. You be receptive to making those changes all the time. The output expectations are going to increase. If, especially for a consultant or your managed services team, you don't want to be able to take 2 weeks to do things, or four weeks or 4 months to deliver to something. The expectations have completely changed. The clients are going to come to you having done a lot of the work themselves, which means a lot of the initial padding and the cushioning that you may have had as a managed services firm, you probably cannot afford to do it. And the client is going to be using a lot of these tools. They're going to use chat gpt or Gemini, much like you and your team does. So you're going to have to constantly keep up, and you can expect that the length of these projects is going to reduce quite a bit. I think that essentially brings me to the very last, slide, right? So let me quickly summarize what we're talking about here. The impact of AI in 2026, and based on my learnings, I think I've captured a number of things here. Maybe I'll add a couple of more, and then we can call it wraps. I've talked to founders who've never been coders, who've never written code, never even hired coders, and they've gone, not just created a prototype, but they've gone to production. Now, they acknowledge that at some point they'll need some senior engineers, not as many, but a few, to help them take it to the next level. If they get funded, or if they find traction, if there's more users, they need to scale it. You need engineers. So you need people who know the business of software and engineering. But that's not the starting point anymore. That's a seismic shift. Uh, in terms of money, not everybody needs to raise money. Like, we are an engineering team, so we didn't have the need to raise money. But if you're a non-engineering founder, you had no choice but to raise money to build or get to see your ideas through, from ideation to it being reality. But that's not the case anymore either. You don't have to raise money. You can do what you can. Ship a version. If it's too clean and has fewer bugs than it should, they say, right, that you waited too long, right? You should have shipped earlier. We are guilty of that as well, right? And at least the very first time we did this, even now for that matter, we try to have as few bugs, if any, as possible before we go live. But that means you waited too long, and it's habit, it's personalities. We're trying to adjust that ourselves. But you want to ship quickly, right? Be iterative. Go talk to your customers, go talk to your investors, see what feedback you get, and chug along. College diplomas, if you have them, it's good. Maybe it is a differentiator when AI filters your resumes, and if AI does not do that, because that's the one that's going to be doing it. It's not humans are looking at profiles and resumes, not initially at least. So if that algorithm, if the check that the team adds to say, hey, check if this person has a college degree, is removed, and AI is going to ignore that, and you're good. But if they don't remove it, and AI does check for that, then your resume is not going to go any further unless you knew the people directly. So yep, you might still want to consider that. We're not there yet where you can say, a college degree, college degree, if you're going to be in medicine or law, the government requires that you have the certification. So sure, you need to do that. But I'm talking about the other fields where it's not really required. I mean, it's optional. You might still need to sort of either do a shorter 2 year diploma or maybe do a part-time diploma essentially. So, but maybe not a full-time 4 year degree anymore. In terms of pay scales and salaries, we didn't talk much about it, but I think there is going to be an impact there as well. I mean, your clients are not going to want to pay you as much anymore, not for all the roles. Some roles are going to get paid a lot more, and other roles are going to get paid much lesser than what they were in the past. So there is going to be that impact. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to do this in a recurring fashion every quarter or so I can share my learnings with you. But hopefully, there are things you learned here that you didn't know before. Talk soon. Until later.